and welcome to this workshop for Multiform API management with IBM. Looks like on my clock, I've got a minute more before we'll get started. We'll let a few other people join in. If someone can just throw in the chat that they can hear me as well as see my screens. Thank you, Gabber. Thank you. Got the +1. That's just what I was looking for. So without a moderator in the room, it's sometimes a little nerve-wracking. So wonderful, wonderful. All right, I'm going to try my best to keep the slides or the chat where I can see it as I'm going through the material. So feel free to post anything in the chat, questions that you have as we're going through the material. Again, I really appreciate everybody hanging in fairly late in the day, local as the conference goes on. For me, it's quite early in the day, so I appreciate everybody doing this. And then, if you'd like, also feel free to you should be able to request to come on audio or video if you'd so choose, and I'm glad to have even a more interactive discussion. I want to keep this open, not just have it be me talking the whole time. So. With that, I see, for at least my time, we're at start, so I will go ahead and get us started here. So again, I am Dan Temkin, product management for IBM API Connect for IBM. So again, thank you for taking time and attending the session. Hopefully, you may have had a chance to attend Kim Clark's session on the main stage earlier today, or Chris Phillips' session. That was another workshop session on API best practices. This is kind of in the same general theme of looking at, all right, when we start digging into, both of them talked a little bit about what do we mean by multi-form API management? How are we delivering that via IBM's API Connect from a product standpoint? So this is going to be a little more product centric as we're going through here. A little background on myself. So I have been with IBM about 10 years and always in the integration space, both as a technical specialist in the field, working across different markets, financial services, industrial, inside the North America region. Then was the integration technical lead focal for technical sales most recently, and then into product management. Before that, I was a customer. So I've built and managed integrations in the B2B and EDI and enterprise application integration as well, spaces for 6.5 years prior to joining IBM, supporting a little over 300 different integrations of different types. So going back into the classic SOA days. So to me, this is a continual evolution of integration. So hopefully, being that we're all here at this conference, this shouldn't be an item of question, at least that first half of the statement. APIs are really the key enabler. And again, we're going to broaden that scope of talking about APIs just beyond REST JSON. But the secondary key to that, so when we talk about APIs are the key, that's the business implementation of an API. That's a technology component delivering Java or Node.js or Golang or some implementation of an API that's delivering a business functionality that a developer has built out. Then taking those APIs and pulling them up into an API management layer is that next critical step into really looking at how can I leverage those APIs that I have in my organization in an effective and useful manner and securely expose them both across different lines of businesses, across different application boundaries, as well as to the outside world in different forms or fashions. So hopefully, and again, if you think I'm wrong, please put some challenge statements in the chat. I'd love again to have this be a dialogue with everybody. So when we look at an API, again the definition of what we're talking about. Some things have changed, some things have not. Especially if we're looking over a continuum. What really has not changed is the fact that that when we talk about managing an API estate, the usual thing we're looking at is managing those business APIs. It's the interface that's focused on that consumer experience, that's geared towards a business asset that I'm trying to deliver, and act some type of logic that's incorporated into an organization. So again, business APIs are focused on really providing that secure and easy to consume interface for the consumer to leverage a aspect of my business. It's not geared at making the provider providing the gains at the provider. If we look at kind of those, look back a little bit at the service-oriented architecture models of the world, that was really much the view was all about the provider. I wanted to make it easy for the provider to stand up new services and to have a very provider-centric view of the world, where when we look at API lifecycle management, it really is about making sure that that consumer experience is with a carrot, that I'm doing as much as I can to make it as easy as possible for the user to experience my services. And in the end, it's not just the developer user that gets the benefits. It's going to trickle all the way down to the person that's interacting with the mobile application, with the web application, with the thick client, because how APIs work, or how our different interaction models and patterns work, actually have impact all the way to the pane of glass that the end user would experience by driving out the best practices. So what has changed is, when we started talking about API lifecycle and management several years ago, we really were focused on kind of two main areas: REST JSON, REST XML a little bit, and we might have included some legacy SOAP XML as part of that, taking those existing services that we might have had in a more traditional service catalog, again, pulling in that the service-oriented architecture days, and exposing those as managed APIs alongside of our more modern REST JSON or REST XML APIs. But where we've seen an expansion in this view set is looking at different styles of APIs that can deliver functionality geared towards different interaction models. And again, it comes back to choosing the right technology to support the interaction model that you're looking for to get with your customers. So some of those are going to be things like, how do we best consume events and async APIs and deliver that rich experience to customers? How do we deliver GraphQL, and when do we best use these? Leveraging things like WebSockets or RPC, even file transfers, and looking at it as I have different ways of consumers interacting with my services. I can start really thinking about all of these things can be defined as an API contract, can be life-cycled in the same form and fashion, can be managed and secured as part of that end user experience. And importantly, having a decoupling layer between the consumer of my API, whatever that might be, and that backend system that's actually providing that business service, the true implementation of the API. So again, we tend to stop thinking about this as much as we really should, but at the end of the day, choosing the right API style, so again, that multi-form style, is really not about what's best for the provider. It really needs to be driven by what's best for the consumer experience that they're going to get. So if I want to have that very data-rich API, and I could build that using classic REST, open API models, but I'm going to end up possibly having it where I'm making a call to get a list of resources, and then I have to iterate over all of those to make dozens upon dozens of calls to build up that collection set that might be required as part of the end consumer experience of trying to fulfill a business operation. Now, it might have been easier for the provider to slice it that way, but is that delivering the best experience for the consumer? Especially if some of those at any point don't go down the happy path route, and you have to retry and they have to go back and get re-pull data. So sometimes that might not be the most efficient model. So it's this constant balancing act between what's easy and simple and ability to deliver in a cost-efficient model, as Chris Phillips talked about in his session, to deliver that business functionality. But sometimes we have to look at the upfront cost of developing needs to be offset by what's that consumer experience that we're looking at driving. So having the ability to deliver that multi-form API lifecycle and management becomes more and more important as we're really focusing more on the consumer experience, more than just on what the provider experience is delivering. So if we look at some of those interaction patterns, and again, I'd love if some in the chat, if you want to post, if you're seeing all of these start to occur, or if you're only seeing one or two of these, but or if you're seeing other patterns that I don't have listed out here, and we could have gone much deeper into patterns, but we wanted to keep this at a relatively high level. But traditionally, we have a request action pattern. That's that standard request acknowledgement, request response kind of pattern when we're calling an API, and that works quite well over both a traditional open API specification, synchronous pattern, as well as leveraging async API patterns for really getting more of a technical, functional acknowledgement versus a business acknowledgement. Again, that's where you got to unpack that. What are we actually trying to deliver as part of that acknowledgement? Then we get into the request state style patterns, where this is a true request response. I'm sending you maybe a business document in, and I'm going to get a business document out as part of that response. A little guaranteed to be more than just a HTTP success code or a JSON success acknowledgement statement. Where then I might also have that request state where I'm going to go and start polling on a topic. Maybe I've made the request as part of a request action, and now I'm going to be polling on a topic or a queue to go retrieve information and get it pushed into my application state, whether it's done through a polling mechanism or done through an actual push delivery mechanism. And of course, finally, true notifications, which would be that subscription model in the full-on pub sub. So we see the need for being able to support all of these different integration patterns when we look at that user experience that you're trying to drive. Because when going through, if we look at like a mobile application or a thick line application or a collection of services, not one interaction pattern is going to be best fit for all the different types of interactions that application is going to want to do with your business service. You can go with that, okay, if I only have a hammer, so everything's a nail model. But if I can leverage different technologies, again, things like GraphQL, async API, REST API, even SOAP services still, to provide the most optimal experience for my application to meet the business needs as well as that consumer experience, we can really drive out better business success and outcome. And a part of this, though, to make clear, is why we focus on the idea of it's really talking about managing that business service is when we start moving into that, moving from the monolithic applications into collections of microservices and micro applications, we really look at the area of the boundaries to be managed is what's coming in and outside of that application scope. Again, could be a vertical thick application, or it could be a collection of microservices. And this is where, from our perspective, an opinionated point in time, is things like Istio and service meshes can really work well when we're going in between those microservices inside of my application boundary. It's when I'm starting to go outside my application boundary scope that I want to make that additional investment, because nothing comes for free, in taking those interfaces, publishing them out to a discovery layer, publishing them out to a gateway, going through the additional work on adding additional layers of documentation, whether it be technical or business level documentation, to really drive the value of that generated contract that you might be using. And so when we start looking at, API now being a broader definition and not just that REST JSON, we can still apply the API management is essential across all the different multi-style and multi-form API management types to still solve these core 4 areas of, I need to look at how can I speed up my application development and continue to drive reusability in APIs, but also making sure that the interfaces that I'm delivering are best tailored for the consumers that I'm trying to deliver them to. That I can do all this in a securely in a secure manner. When we look at things like defense in depth, making sure that that API gateway is a strong gateway that can really deliver a security endpoint that will be a trusted enforcement layer for you. And it's, again, not the only enforcement layer, but for having knowledge about the API context, it should be able to remove the need for that backend application to be as concerned about negative traffic. So the more of that negative traffic that can be stopped and blocked at the gateway and filtered down before it gets to the business application, one that optimizes the business application's compute capabilities because it's not having to deal with negative traffic, as well as we're block and tackling security threats and exposure as far forward into the infrastructure as we can before it gets down deep into the business logic layers. Of course, by pushing these APIs into a common catalog and having that ability to discover, of course, it's delivering a brand reach. And brand, again, might be at the scope of your whole company, might be the scope of individual line of businesses that are saying, hey, I have business value that should be consumed across line of business. And again, delivering that internal brand reputation is just as important often as deploying out that external brand reputation. And then once we get into, now we have this composable catalog of services, now we can start really looking at, okay, digital change and looking at different ways of either monetizing our environment, again, either direct or indirect monetization. And we could go down a deep conversation with that if you want to. Just feel free to schedule a one-on-one with me there. But also looking at how can I take all these services that I have and create new composable business models that might not have been possible because I didn't have easy access to discover these different areas, and I can start pulling together different APIs into a new composition layer for my clients. So IBM provides the API management layer in our delivers all these capabilities of API lifecycle management through our flagship product called IBM API Connect. This includes the abilities to create, manage, secure, and socialize APIs across multiple clouds in a hybrid use case where we can really fulfill that vision of having a unified management layer and deployed gateways across an ecosystem of environments. All leveraging our market-leading gateway technology, Data Power, which can be deployed as a physical appliance all the way down to a single core container with the ability to do vertical and horizontal pod auto scaling. So again, giving you that flexibility of, I will have a VMware estate, I have a physical data center estate, I have a Kubernetes estate that I want to deploy into. I can deploy a common gateway architecture that gives me the same functionality at runtime in all these environments without having to kind of perform some technical hoops to get it there. Now, again, just from a packaging standpoint, we offer this functionality in multiple different forms, from our leading Cloud Pak for integration, which brings in API management alongside with messaging, eventing, high-speed data transfer, app integration, again, into a unified integration platform. IBM API Connect is a standalone, and then a few different variants on being able to do SaaS deployments, both on public cloud as well as in a reserve instance model. And as I mentioned, we can have a common management plane. So I can have the development portal, the manager, the analytics, all done as a common layer, but then have hybrid gateways deployed out in any number of on-prem and cloud data centers in different form factors, and deploy APIs that are specific to those environments, only to those gateways, to again deliver that I have a unified view of my estates with localized control. So when we go into some of these capabilities a little bit deeper, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. And again, I encourage everybody to go look at, go over to the Partner Village and look at our booth. And you can dive more into some of the more, I'll say that the entries of API Connect. The first part is we have to be able to create APIs, and we've streamlined this process for both REST APIs with OpenAPI 2 and 3, SOAP services, GraphQL, and async APIs. So pulling all those different functionalities together and giving it the same unified lifecycle and management and creation process, both from a graphical user interface, from a CI/CD model, as well as all these are defined as YAML files. And they're open API specification that we use as part of generating these contracts with additional extensions. So that way we can go in and edit those files, deploy them back out, and have a bidirectional synchronization. There's not a import process and then I have to export, and I might have lost something in that import export as I'm going through. We maintain that YAML across the whole of its life cycle. And again, this allows to really improve developer productivity because they're not having to go in and constantly kind of import and export and retweak what they were doing. And we provide both the server side as well as a local test environment for building out these components that provide the same user experience, both from a graphical user interface and a CI/CD API interface. And then, of course, providing additional tooling for doing no-code visual composition of policy, providing integrated tests and debugging, and then, of course, all the DevOps capabilities that you'd expect in an enterprise-grade product. As part of API Connect, again, we're treating all these different multi-form APIs, which again, topic of this call, in the same way. So I can take that REST API, that SOAP API, that GraphQL API, and maybe they all make sense being part of the same product that I want a consumer to subscribe to. Because when they subscribe to my product, to really leverage that business functionality, they might want all three of those for some hypothetical reason, or they might need a collection of a few different REST APIs and maybe one GraphQL API, and I want to allow that ease of subscription and containment in one product there. And I can lifecycle all of these and version all of these and push them through that packaging process to allow then us to publish that out to, again, in that hybrid approach across any number of endpoints. So allowing us to really look at these, again, that everywhere we're saying APIs, really looking at that as that holistic multi-style API the delivery model. And in delivering that promise, it's, from an API Connect standpoint, it's also, we need to be able to secure all these equally, and different types of API integration models, if we're talking async APIs or GraphQL APIs, have different security needs that they have at the gateway. So having awareness of, just because it's a JSON, REST JSON versus GraphQL, well, they're both over the HTTP protocol, but what it means to do rate limiting of these two are vastly different. A rate limiting of a traditional REST API, I might be just doing it purely based on the number of calls to that resource. How many gets did I make to that resource, and how many do I allow for a unit of time? So maybe 100 calls per hour. But with a GraphQL query, GraphQL API, I might have a single call that is the equivalency of hundreds, if not thousands, of those individual REST calls because of my query scope. So that same concept of HTTP rate limiting doesn't really work at that point. So having context inspection on what does it really mean as part of that GraphQL query and embedding that as part of what we mean by securing is a big part of delivering that at the gateway. As part of, again, this multi-style experience, I don't want to have to go and look at multiple different catalogs and go, oh, here's my REST services catalog, so here's my async catalog, and here's my GraphQL catalog. All of those should be in a unified catalog, and that's again what we deliver as part of it. So that way, again, we can socialize out these APIs, whether it be for internal consumption or external consumption, to allow for self-service and subscription, allow for that ease of no-code testing right inside the developer portal, along with additional features that I highly encourage customers leverage things like blogs and forums to allow for that feedback loop from the consumers right back to the providers. So that way they can get the best in class experience that you can give them for consuming APIs and understanding how those work. Now, of course, we provide all the end-to-end DevOps ready features with the idea that it's to deliver those within your pipeline of choice, that we're not dictating what technologies you use for that. And this doesn't just include the ability to deploy these services out, but also to automate the API tests, to manage and publish, and to automate the portal customization. So all of these different things are included as part of that. And again, when I want to make sure, as talking about this isn't just for the REST APIs, it's for all the different styles of APIs that we'd expect to get this functionality. And lastly, when it comes to kind of that global view, is gathering that analytics of what APIs and services are being used, which ones are being used in conjunction with each other. So I can see, oh, this one client or this one consumer group subscribe to this set of products. Maybe there's something going on that I want to look at of why are they constantly subscribing that set of products, and maybe I can start looking at bundling those together if it makes sense to provide an even easier on-ramp to giving that consumer experience. Drilling down into looking at latency and response times. The management system is great because I can look at, okay, these backend services I have, maybe there's one that's being used quite a lot, and maybe we should look at an IT investment to look at performance tuning that backend service even more, so that way that, again, that total cost, that customer experience that we're giving out to the front end gets reduced even further. And again, all that information you can either view through our own dashboards or offload those into kind of your external system of choice. Now, I did want to dive in now a little more on some of the multi-style APIs. So GraphQL being not just another API endpoint, and kind of make sure that when we talk about there's a lot of base functionality that I've already talked about between all of these different that we deliver as part of our solution. But when we start looking at what does it mean to deliver GraphQL services, we have to kind of think that it's, again, beyond the REST. I already talked a little about it, but it's that it's a powerful model. Instead of me necessarily having to create 10 or 15 different API contracts that might fulfill different consumer use cases, I might have one GraphQL contract that then, based on the queries that are coming in, can model out those different graph responses to give those different consumers that different faceted experience. So that way, that mobile consumer that only wants a very small set of fields, well, that's what they can request. The big, more maybe data lake, data science team that is using that exact same GraphQL endpoint could look at and saying, well, I want the full data set. I want as much data as you're willing to give me and as many records as you're willing to give me at a time. And again, this is the beauty and the flexibility of Graph, but also some of the added complication that you get with it. And where, again, when we say in this server side cost, I'm talking about the backend provider that's actually going and pulling the data and building it out. So from a single call, again, could say I want to query and I want to get it back 1,000 record sets. And have that tree built out and get sent back to me. That can be a very expensive call, still one. So when we look at what does it mean to cost a call, and this is not monetization, but this is really looking at what is the compute cost of this call. What do I want to wait on these different things? That's something we have to start thinking about on how to best optimize a gateway to handle GraphQL. So again, as I mentioned, traditional rate limiting doesn't really work when we get into this. I mean, we can still say, oh, you're only allowed to make so many graph queries per hour, but maybe that one query I make in that hour, again, it could be equivalent to that same REST API or or REST collection of APIs, most likely, making dozens or hundreds of calls. So it's very fast, very flexible, but it also means that there's easy ways for people to poke and prod at your data, because what ends up happening is usually when we're talking about backend applications exposing their graph interfaces, it's that data model is kind of getting surfaced all the way up. So it opens up new and interesting security areas for people to kind of poke at your system. So we've looked at making sure that we really understood what it meant to be a GraphQL gateway as part of delivering this, and making sure that we had optimizations in this. And we really delivered native gateway functionality that understands what it means to be a GraphQL request and can build out build out its assembly, so how we process inside of our gateway based on the introspection of the GraphQL schemas that are getting sent. And that, again, kind of creates this feedback loop of us being able to look at setting proper limits and weights and figuring out how to suggest areas of risk. So that way you as a provider putting this GraphQL endpoint on a system that's designed, as a management layer that's designed for consumption, can minimize the risk. So that way we can start looking at the security enforcement pushed, again, away from the backend business application and up into the enterprise gateway that's being delivered. So this includes things like being able to at the gateway remove or kind of delete types from the schema. So that way you can ensure that someone's not probing at the requests as they're going through, as well as look at based on the calling client, which fields are you allowed to access. So with that, I'm going to try. I will say it's my first time on this platform, so hopefully this will come through. Please in the chat yell at me if it's causing a little problems. I'm going to try to get the I'm trying to get the screen back up so I can see what's going on here. All right, so we have lots of different choices for how we can build APIs in API Connect. I'm skipping the creating a simple REST API, and we're jumping right into creating GraphQL-based APIs. And again, we support OpenAPI 2 and OpenAPI 3 specifications, as well as async APIs, and provide accelerators for generating these APIs. But from here, I can create a new GraphQL service based on an existing GraphQL API that's in the backend. So this is about taking that same experience that I would expect to get as part of a open API specification and pulling that into the GraphQL type model. So again, providing that name, I can take and provide a service endpoint and leverage GraphQL introspection to pull the schema directly from that backend service and start generating artifacts based on that backend endpoint that I'm calling. So as part of that, if it fails for whatever reason, I can click this replace and kind of pull in that schema manually. But if I'm able to go and introspect that backend service, we can accelerate the work it takes to provide this service up into our gateway. And this includes things like being able to say, hey, the service that we're exposing, do we allow for support of that standard introspection? Maybe we don't want to have that, and we only want it to be that you have to pull down the contract from the portal. We can also enable the standard GraphQL editor as a web-based model for allowing people to interact with it, as well as implement the cost model, which I'll get to in here in a little bit. So again, making it fairly simple. I'm going to jump ahead because I did. So we were able to kind of accelerate this process of importing this in, and now I can go into the GraphQL schema, and I can, it provides all the different functions that got pulled in as part of the import. but we also provide warnings. So this is us doing some inspection on that GraphQL, and and these warnings are specific right now around those limits. So where we're querying into the request structure and saying, okay, we're seeing that there are some of these limits set, and maybe you want to actually set some specific weights or add some additional parsing to kind of decide, are there certain ranges that you want to support? So that way it's not just an unbound model. So it's determining, giving information so that the gateway can use that information to provide enforcements for those rate limits in a GraphQL way. So again, you could go do this yourself, but we've built in this recommendation engine to kind of inspect this and be able to provide these recommendation approaches. So in this case, providing, I want to assume size, maybe that I'm only going to set that limit of 10, or I could have it as a range limiter on bounded. So it allows us to provide that additional functionality into that. Now, and as part of clicking that apply, we just made the schema smarter, and we can still go in and view source and modify it down at the source level. But we can also go in and and make it even more powerful. So we can modify the show or hide. So again, this is in that model of that backend system might be having records that I don't want to expose to external. It might be again external to different line of business or external to across a outside my organization. I might want to hide those, but I don't want to have to go into that backend system and figure out, okay, how do I apply proper RBAC rules? How do I make sure I'm exposing an interface that's already got that tuned? I can do that here at the gateway and do that more than just a simple show hide in schema, but I can also provide expressions that allow it to be shown for a certain consumer group, for a certain provider org plan. There's different constructs in our management layer that allows me to provide those filters. So that way I can set just any number of interface permutations for different consumers without having to publish out multiple APIs as we might normally do in a more traditional REST-based API. So again, making it providing providing a lot of power here. So this gets really important when we're talking about things like that PCI data like a credit card, or HIPAA data like healthcare information, where we don't even want to show that it's available for a specific consumer or for anybody to be able to call. And this could be both in here's the data that's that could be responded with. And then I can set different weights on this data. So this is kind of getting into that costing kind of model of if I have one of those records that might be fairly expensive to go get, I can set that weight higher. So that way, it's going to, use that to judge the maximum weight of that request. Because again, any number of permutations in the data sets. So that way I might say that for this consumer, they have a max weight of 10, and we'll add up the different weights they were requesting for and validate that they can't go over their weight limits to kind of figure out that cost of what it means for that backend server to go build out that response set. So it's great here then is I can go right from defining those weights, I can move over and start testing that GraphQL API and send it, test it. And again, that's testing it through our gateway all the way to the backend GraphQL backend business service that's delivering it. We also get all the trace capability, that's part of our assembly, and I could go in and add additional logic into this assembly, but we built out that assembly just by importing that GraphQL schema. We can also take that endpoint and have it published into our developer portal where people can subscribe to it. Again, that's just part of that product publishing it. But for quick testing, I can also go in and add it in and pull it up into the the graphical tester for external consumers and for rapid testing. And I can start testing different client IDs. We'll pull the default one out really quickly, and start doing some of this tests, so that way they can start exploring this GraphQL without having to write any code, without having to pull down their own tool to do it. It's aligned in with the product and already kind of pre-wired in with what we're doing. So it allows for a really fast and easy way to test my services, make sure that it's doing what I need it to do. I can leverage more complex test cases. In our testing tab, we also will generate examples that then can provide more complex examples based on us introspecting the contract. So again, providing not necessarily a test suite, but a way to quickly generate some test models that might help you learn how to best leverage GraphQL and get really started leveraging that inside the gateway. So what's great is this really then allows us to now have GraphQL again inside of our existing the product that has, as I mentioned earlier, REST APIs, and now I can start treating those APIs with the same OAuth tokens, with the same API key and subscriptions. I can start leveraging that multiform API across the consumer boundary line. So again, gaining a lot of flexibility with what you're doing there. I think I've got a little more time. I lost track of when the session ends. If someone can do me a favor and just post in the chat what time the session ends. It doesn't tell me here how much time I've got left. But I'll keep going as long as everybody's willing to hang on. At the top of the hour. Okay, so I got 9 minutes. Thank you. Appreciate that. So event, yeah, it's all time zone based. I'll do top of the hour. So again, event endpoint management. I won't be able to go into this as much. I do have demos of this as well, but unfortunately, we're going to not have as much time. But we're providing the exact same functionality. I need to be able to describe the events that I might want people to consume. Again, we're leveraging the async APIs. And by the way, we're IBM as a contributor and participating member to both async API and the Open API initiative. So we're really backing these standards as a way of moving forward and defining these structures and then leveraging them as part of our full strategy. So again, not taking those models and converting them into an internal model that we're leveraging. So it allows for us to describe those events, describe that pub sub interaction, discover, then publish those out into, again, that same common portal where all of our other APIs would be published. So again, making it that common catalog of both async and RESTful and SOAP and GraphQL based services, searchable, understandable, and ready to consume. So again, making it all about that developer consumer experience. And then making sure that as part of publishing out, again, I'll use Kafka topic for this example. If I'm publishing out my Kafka topic, now I'm making it much easier to allow for that self-service access. So that way a developer can go find the topic, see let's just say it's an Avro schema or a JSON schema for that topic, see, what can I publish onto it? Am I allowed to subscribe to anything on a related topic? Go and start testing out those capabilities. Still have policy-based controls for enforcement on use, but I can decouple that away from the actual broker. So now I might have IBM's event streams, which is our enterprise Kafka implementation. I might have just open source Kafka. I might have Confluent Kafka, or any mix of Kafka implementations. And I might have multiple Kafka clusters in my environment that are completely decoupled, but I want to surface all of those different topics up into that common management layer, just as I have different business applications all over my environment, again, surfacing those APIs up into the management layer. Doing the same thing with async APIs, allowing me to decouple that consumer from the back-end infrastructure, because we are providing an event endpoint management gateway in front of those backend brokers. So that way, if I need to move my, where my broker is or change some of my security, I created that digital slinky of integration in between those two. And of course, looking at additional things like tracking of use. So that way, if I'm looking at both indirect or direct monetization or analytics, I can start really gaining additional insight across a diverse Kafka or eventing estate. So I'm gonna skip these two demos. We will provide links to the demos. Oh, it's just jumping all over. I'm trying to back up, and it's my mouse is sliding around all over here. So I did want to highlight. We would love for you to take some time and try out IBM API Connect as well as the rest of the Cloud Pak for integration. We offer a free trial, so it's just ibm.biz/try-cp4i. So a pretty easy short URL to get to. It's a free trial with guided labs that you can go through. Again, also take some time to reach out onto our podium. And there's additional assets out there, as well as we have some additional sessions tomorrow. I know Chris is speaking again on stage tomorrow, and if you have interest in talking to us direct, please feel free to reach out on via email or LinkedIn to any of the IBM speakers that have been here at the conference, as well as feel free to use the in-conference tool to do scheduled meetings. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. And if there are, I didn't see any additional questions in the chat, but if there are any additional questions, I'll kind of open it up and see what people have of interest. Again, I really do appreciate your time, especially kind of late in the conference day when I know it's, you've probably heard a lot of different content so far. Not seeing any questions in the chat. Nice, quiet group today. So, well, I do appreciate everybody's time, and again, I thank you. I will hang on for a few minutes more, but if not, again, thank you for attending the session, and have a great time at the rest of API Days Helsinki and North the rest of today, and hopefully you attend more of the sessions tomorrow. All right, thanks.